faces all around you. People you've known for years. Your whole world, essentially, gathered in one place. A brother at the front opens the Bible and reads Jeremiah 17, verse 5. Cursed is the man who puts his trust in mere humans, who relies on human power, and whose heart turns away from Jehovah. You nod, because it's correct, because you believe it, because there is absolutely no ambiguity in that text. The word cursed is doing exactly what it sounds like, and mere humans means mere humans. No footnote, no asterisk, no quiet exception carved out anywhere. And then, barely 10 minutes later, in that exact same meeting, a question is asked. Why does trusting in Jehovah include trusting his human representatives? Your hand goes up, 30 seconds or less. Excellent answer. Now, if I described that sequence to someone who had never set foot in a kingdom hall, someone with no prior knowledge of the organization, they would assume I was describing a psychological experiment, a controlled scenario designed to study how the human brain handles direct contradiction. Because the cognitive dissonance of holding those two instructions simultaneously should be, as behavioral scientists would put it, incredibly uncomfortable. But it isn't a hypothetical. It isn't an experiment. It's a meeting scheduled for the week of July 13th in kingdom halls across the world, simultaneously. And I want to look at exactly what is happening inside that room. Not the contradiction itself. I think most of us have clocked that by now. But the architecture underneath it. The reason it works. Because it isn't accidental. And there's a name for it. Let's actually sit with Jeremiah 17, verse 5 for a moment, because I think we move past it too quickly. We hear it, we agree with it, and then the program carries us forward before it fully lands. This is what Jehovah says. Cursed is the man who puts his trust in mere humans, who relies on human power, and whose heart turns away from Jehovah. The text doesn't say, be careful about which humans you trust. It doesn't say outsiders are dangerous, but insiders are fine. It says mere humans. That's the entire category, unqualified, complete. And the talk doesn't stop there. It layers in Isaiah 30 verses 1 and 2, a sharp rebuke of relying on human counsel. Building something, making sure the foundation is solid before anything else goes up. Then Jeremiah, verse 6, the person who trusts in humans is a withered shrub in a parched desert, totally cut off from water, living in a salt land where nothing grows. That image isn't decorative, that's fear, spiritual starvation, painted so starkly it's supposed to stay behind your eyes. And then immediately, verse 7, the contrast. The person who trusts in Jehovah is a tree planted by a stream, deep roots, green leaves, bearing fruit even in a drought year. Binary, completely binary. You are one or the other, no middle ground offered. This warning has a scriptural address, Jeremiah 17, specific book, specific chapter, specific verse. You can open any Bible on earth, point to the page, and read those exact words. Within their own theological framework, within the framework they gave you, this is fully verifiable, undeniable. Which is what makes the spiritual gems question so hard to look at directly. Because the question doesn't arrive days later in a different publication with time to process. It arrives in the same meeting, handled by another brother as the very next item on the program. And it doesn't ask you to reflect on the warning, it asks you to explain it away, in 30 seconds or less, out loud, in front of everyone you know. To answer the spiritual gems question, the brother points to the February 2022 Watchtower, paragraphs 7 and 8. Here is what it says exactly. The plain truth is that we cannot say that we trust in Jehovah if we do not trust in his earthly representatives. Stay with that sentence for a second. That is not a gentle suggestion. That is a doctrinal statement of absolute equivalence. Trusting God and trusting these men, same thing. You cannot have one without the other. The article goes further. It mandates that followers must heed the direction they receive from the organization and the elders. It explicitly links obedience to these men with obedience to God's way of doing things. A claim of that magnitude demands evidence. It demands a scriptural address, book, chapter, verse. The Watchtower cites one scripture in support. 1. Acts 16, verses 4 and 5. Let me read what that passage actually describes. Paul and Timothy, traveling through towns, delivering letters containing decrees from the apostles and elders in Jerusalem to local congregations. First-century men, walking Roman roads, delivering correspondence about early Christian disputes to localized communities. That specific ancient logistical event is being asked to carry the full doctrinal weight of absolute obedience to a modern global organization. That is the leap. And even if you accepted it, even if you said yes, somehow that establishes modern organizational authority, it still doesn't touch Jeremiah 17:5. The warning is still there, intact, unaddressed. Then there's the 2018 broadcast. Governing body member Garrett Losh on camera speaking to millions of witnesses worldwide. And he says,
"Since Jehovah God and Jesus Christ completely trust the faithful and discreet slave, should we not do the same?"
Completely trust. Settled fact. Present tense. No citation, no scripture, no address. He states as established truth, a truth that God himself holds, a claim that has no chapter and verse anywhere in the Bible. He presents it as though the conversation is already over, and the confidence of it, stating the unprovable as settled fact on camera to a global audience without a single reference, I still find that audacious in a way that's hard to fully articulate. But here's the thing, the audacity works, because by the time Loesch says those words, the architecture is already built. And to understand why it works, why rational, intelligent people sit in that room and raise their hand, you need to understand what philosopher Karl Popper spent his career studying. Popper's concept is called falsifiability. A falsifiable claim is one where you can imagine evidence that would prove it wrong. A healthy belief system can be tested. If the evidence contradicts the claim gets revised. An unfalsifiable claim is structured so that no evidence can ever touch it. Not because the evidence doesn't exist, because the system has pre-built a response to every possible piece of it. Popper illustrated this with a dragon. If I tell you I have a fire-breathing dragon in my garage, you ask to see it. I say it's invisible. You suggest throwing flour on the floor to find its footprints. I say it floats. You suggest a thermal camera to catch its feet. I say it breathes cold fire. Every test you propose, the claim survives. Not because it's true, because it's been engineered to be untestable. Now, watch how the loop functions here. If the governing body leads well, if the organization grows, if things go right, that is proof that Jehovah is actively guiding them. Trust them. But if the governing body makes a mistake, and Loesch himself acknowledged in that same broadcast that they are imperfect humans who make errors, that failure is not evidence against their authority. It's reframed as proof of their humanity, a test of your loyalty. trust them anyway. Wait for God to correct them in His time. Every road leads to the same destination. Success proves divine backing. Failure proves human imperfection. There is no piece of evidence, no mistake, no contradiction, no harmful policy that can ever logically lead you to the conclusion that you should reevaluate their authority. The house always wins. And then the loop goes one step further, because when a deeply held belief is challenged, the brain registers it as a physical threat, fight or flight. The body treats the information like a predator, and before critical thinking has time to engage, the mind files it. Apostates twisting things, taken out of context, Satan sowing mistrust. Garrett Loesch named this mechanism in that same 2018 broadcast. He called outside information rumors, and explicitly linked the act of engaging with those rumors to undermining trust in the leadership. He is not arguing against the content of the information. He is telling you what category to put it in before you read it. And the most precise part of the trap, if you ask, where is the scripture that says I have to trust you? You are not seen as a diligent student of the Bible. You are someone in spiritual danger, lacking faith. The question itself becomes the evidence against you. So the critical thought never fully forms. Not because it isn't there, because the system has pre-labeled the act of forming it as a moral failing. That is what Jeremiah 17 verse 5 is being made to do inside this meeting. It's read aloud as a genuine warning, and then, after 10 minutes, inside the same program, the very act of applying it, of actually believing the words you just heard, is transformed into a spiritual problem. This is what this is, stripped of its theological framing. It is a structure where obedience to specific men has been made identical to obedience to God, with no scriptural address to support it, and no mechanism by which it can ever be proven wrong. That's it. That's what it is. I want to speak to one specific moment, not a category of people. One moment. You're sitting in that meeting. The spiritual gems question gets asked. You know the answer from the provided material. Your hand goes up. The brother points to you. In 30 seconds or less, you explain out loud why trusting the governing body is the same as trusting Jehovah. He says, "Excellent answer." And you meant it. You were entirely sincere. But somewhere underneath the sincerity, something very quiet was trying to form. A thought without words yet. Something that said, if the text just told me not to trust humans, and nobody in this room gave me a single verse to prove I should trust these specific ones, why did I just say that out loud? That whisper is not a spiritual problem. That whisper is the only honest thing in the room. If you have been trained to believe that trusting your own plain reading of a text, seeing the warning written directly on the page is a sign of spiritual danger, then the question isn't just what you've been taught. The question is whether you still trust your own mind. Awaken, question, and discover. Until the next video, goodbye.